It's the Utah preview right now on Frogs Insider. Hey, Frog fans, welcome into another episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. I'm Jamie Plunkett. Melissa Treebosser will be along shortly. She's got a great interview to preview TCU and Utah this weekend. She's got Steve Bartle from KSL Sports hopping on the show to preview that football game. Very excited for y'all to hear that conversation. It's a great one, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with y'all. We're also going to take a little bit of a conversation about what is TCU's identity. We're going to take a look at what TCU's identity is or isn't. I asked Sonny Dykes about this earlier this week in his press conference, and he gave a really interesting answer that I wrote about a little bit today over at hornfrogblitz.com. I'm going to talk about it a little bit on the show as well. Plus, we heard from Bud Clark earlier this week as well, and he talks about how TCU can better translate what they do in the middle of the week to Saturdays. So we're going to talk about that as well. But first, Frogs Insider Podcast presented by the Flying T Club. The Flying T Club is a great organization, and I don't say that just because we're partnered with them. I don't say that just because they're the presenting sponsor of the show. We wouldn't work with them if we didn't think that they were doing good work, good business. And I really appreciate what the Flying T Club has done for the TCU community, for TCU student athletes, and for Fort Worth in general. They partner with over 110 TCU student athletes. They're not only a big NIL collective, they're TCU's only NIL collective. They partner with over 110 student athletes. They partner with multiple nonprofit organizations around the city of Fort Worth. They pair up student athletes with those organizations to do great work in the communities of Fort Worth. Just a really cool organization. If you go over to flyingtclub.com, you can see all of the great work that they're doing. You can read some of the stories about the student athletes that they support, and you can find different ways to get involved today. I would encourage you to do that. It's really meaningful work. It's not like other NIL collectives where you just write a check and you're done. It is a cool organization that has multiple different ways to get involved. So go to flyingtclub.com and check them out today and connect with them today. Really cool organization. Also want to give a big shout out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Frogs Insider is a part of the Republic of Football Network, which is a podcast feed that has a show for every D1 football program in the state of Texas. That's 13 different shows, all in one podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. So all you have to do is search Republic of Football Network, and you will find that feed. You'll get our show. You'll get a show for Tech, A&M, UT, but also North Texas and UTEP and Texas State and Rice. A lot of excellent content across the network. You'll be the most informed fan of Texas college football if you subscribe to the Republic of Football Network. Not to mention the main show over at Dave Campbell's Texas Football that does a rundown of every game in the state of Texas every single week. A phenomenal show in its own right as well. If you're looking for just the TCU content, if you only want Frogs Insider, we've got you, baby. Just go search Frogs Insider wherever you get your podcasts, and our feed will show up. We have our weekly show, which goes live on Monday mornings. That's the show that also shows up in the Republic of Football Network feed, but we've also got other shows. This one, for example, that doesn't show up in the Republic of Football Network feed. It only shows up on this one. So if you're listening, congratulations, you're already here, but also tell a friend. Let them know, hey, if you only are getting one Frogs Insider show a week, did you know that they do two? Here's how you can get the second one. Because we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to hear some of the content that we're doing, especially these previews that Melissa's putting together. I think they're fantastic, and I think everybody should give them a listen because they're really informative. You learn a lot about the other team. You learn a lot about what the culture is like in those programs, what the scene is like if you're going on that road game, like people are going up to Salt Lake City this weekend. Just fantastic content, and want to make sure that everybody can listen to it. So, Frogs Insider, wherever you get your podcasts, Republic of Football Network, wherever you get your podcasts. But don't forget about the YouTube channel either. Frogs Insider YouTube channel. We've crossed the 800 subscriber threshold. We're continuing to climb. We're trying to get to 1,000 by Halloween. Come on. If we get to 1,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel by Halloween, you guys want to know a secret? I'll tell you what Melissa's going to do for the challenge, because we're picking each other's challenges. I'm picking one for her. She's putting out a Twitter poll. Y'all can vote on what I have to do. Found a chip. If you've heard me talk about this on previous shows, it's not a spicy chip. It's a salty chip. advertised as the saltiest chip in the world. And I've watched a couple videos of some people trying to do this. And I'm just saying, like, it would be really funny. It would be really funny for Melissa to try and do this saltiest chip in the world. 1,000 subscribers by Halloween. I think we can do it. We started promoting the YouTube channel at the beginning of the football season, or like a couple weeks before the football season started. You got us to 500 by the Stanford game, and now we're over 800 a couple weeks later. Like, we're growing like crazy. Let's keep the momentum going. And Melissa will eat the saltiest chip ever, and I'll do whatever the heck you guys vote for on her Twitter poll. Pretty cool. So yes, Frogs Insider YouTube. I think we've done all the podcast business at this point. We've gotten it all out of the way. So let's do this. Let us go over to NCAAinsiders.com and let's start talking about TCU versus Utah. Really interesting game. I'm going to pull up this matchup preview for those of you that are on the YouTube channel. So if you're listening audio version, I'm going to explain everything. Don't worry. Or you could hop over to the YouTube channel and check it out there. We've got a bunch of different stuff on the YouTube channel beyond just these shows as well. We've got player interviews. We've got, all of the pre and post game and midweek press conferences for Sonny and the players, and we've got some basketball content that's going up. We've got some baseball content that's going up soon. So you really do want to get over to the YouTube channel. But anyways, if you go to collegefootballinsiders.com or NCAAinsiders.com, they both direct to the same spot, you will get these excellent game previews. Let's see. For every single football game, every single weekend. These use some advanced analytics to break down what the game could look like. It runs a projection for you, so you see each team's projected points. You see each team's win probability. You can see how specific things stack up against each other. Really cool website, collegefootballinsiders.com is where you can go for all of that stuff. So as we take a look at this chart that shows TCU against Utah in that matchup, Utah is clearly the favorite. I believe they're like a 6.5, 7-point favorite in Vegas right now. That makes a ton of sense. TCU's reeling. Utah is coming off a loss. Losing Cam Rising still probably should be the favorite in this football game, and it's not hard to see why. If you look in the top section, you'll see TCU's offense compared to Utah's defense, and you'll notice that Utah is 54th in the country in EPA per rush allowed, and TCU's run game is 87th in EPA per rush. Not great. Not a great matchup. You keep going down, though, and you see that Utah's got a top 30 defense when it comes to per snap EPA per dropback of opponents. TCU's offense is pretty good in dropback situations. We've known that for a while. Kendall Briles has got the passing game humming for the most part. TCU's 34th in EPA per dropback for offenses, but they're going up against arguably the best secondary they've seen all year. So some things to look at. If you look at these charts, you'll be able to start to see, okay, well, I can see that Utah's got the 8th best defensive success rate in the country. Well, what does that mean? That means on a per play basis, Utah is doing more than what they need to do to stifle opposing offenses. Meanwhile, you look at TCU's defensive success rate, and they are 94th. And that just feels right, doesn't it? Because TCU's defense has struggled quite a bit this year. So collegefootballinsiders.com is where you can go to see a little bit more advanced data, help you be a more informed fan as you start to get into some of these football games. But what's really interesting, I think, about this matchup is the fact that Cam Rising isn't playing. 7th-year player, played in the Arizona State game last Friday, did not look healthy. He got rolled up on early. He's had a couple leg injuries. He's had concussion issues. This year he broke a finger on his hand, on his throwing hand. He just didn't look right. Kyle Whittingham has since announced that he is out for the year, which means that he has, because he missed a couple games earlier in the season, the potential to take a medical red shirt and be an 8th-year football player next year. I don't know if you should do that. At some point, coming back that often stifles the development of the program, stifles the development of that position. And when you have a freshman like Isaac Wilson who's shown you a little bit, You may be time to have a hard conversation with Cam Rising about LinkedIn.com. It just might. And that's not a slight against him. He's been a fantastic college quarterback when he's healthy, but at some point you got to do what's best for the program if you're Kyle Whittingham. And I don't know what that looks like. But as far as Isaac Wilson is concerned, he's thrown more interceptions than he has touchdowns this year. He has 7 interceptions to 6 touchdowns thrown. He's not quite as mobile as Cam Rising when Cam Rising is healthy. But the reality of the situation is if you're looking at some of these advanced numbers, specifically about Utah's offense, you see that they're relatively middle of the road when it comes to their offensive success rate and their passing success rate. Where they really are more successful is in the run game. They've been a run-oriented offense for quite a while, and they've got a dang good running back. So even though you lose Cam Rising, you're going back to Isaac Wilson, who's struggled at times in the passing game this year. I think Utah's offense, because it's already so reliant on the run, still is set up for success in this football game. That being said, if you're TCU and you're coming off of a bye week and you've struggled against the run, and you're playing a team that you know is good against the run, or good at running the football, this might be the time. This might be the game to step up and show up and say, no, we're improving, we're fitting better in the run stop, we're going to load the box a little bit more, we're going to make Isaac Wilson throw the football. I think there's a real opportunity for TCU's defense here to show up and have a decent day. And I think if they have a decent day, and the offense can get some things rolling, we might see a closer football game than people are thinking. If you look at these projections at NCAA and insiders.com, you'll see that Utah is projected to win by about a touchdown. So right around where Vegas has the spread. But there is, I think, a lot of potential for TCU to keep this football game close if they come out with energy, if they come out organized and disciplined and play efficient, high-quality execution football. Is that something we've seen from them this year? Not consistently, no. But if they can figure it out and put it all together up in Salt Lake City, I think they could have a decent day. Well, does that mean they'll come away with the win? No. But would we see an improved football team? There's a possibility there. But for more of this, let's go ahead and jump in to Melissa's interview with Steve Bartle of KSL Sports. They're going to take much longer and much more care to break down this football game between TCU and Utah. So let's go ahead and jump into that right now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another preview edition of the Frogs Insider podcast, proudly brought to you by the Flying T Club at TCU, as well as our friends at Dave Campbell's Texas Football and the Republic of Football Network. I am joined this evening by Steve Bartle, Utes insider for KSL Sports, and one of the most knowledgeable Utah reporters around. The guy's got great insight. So, Steve, really appreciate you taking some time to hop on and preview this game that TCU fans are absolutely dreading, and Utah's probably looking forward to get back on track. It's just delightful.
Yeah, it'll be, this matchup will be fun. I think, considering where both programs are at, right, we're going to learn a lot about them in the second half of the season. So it should be a fun matchup. I think this is one kind of rekindling the matchup from the Mountain West Conference days, and that's what it'll be a fun matchup.
I mean, these two teams really do have a great history. And, I think that the glory days of the Mountain West is something that's not appreciated by general college football fans enough. I mean, when you look at when TCU was really rolling, you had Utah kind of at the peak of their power. Maybe not the peak, because they seem to still be pretty powerful. You had BYU was a really strong program. Teams like San Diego State had good runs. They were some great matchups. But those Utah TCU ones always seem to have a little bit of extra juice. And so I don't know if that's going to be recreated Saturday night in Salt Lake City, but as you mentioned, there's a great history. How do Utah fans look at TCU? Do they see this as a rivalry, or are they just kind of excited to maybe start to rebuild a rivalry between these two fan bases?
That's an interesting question, Melissa, just given the sour taste that has been left in the mouth of Utah fans for 12 years, 10, 14 years now?
Yeah.
It's certainly one where
you
they're
brought it
looking
up,
for
not
a
me.
little.
I just want to say.
I know. It's so, it's an interesting one, right? I do think this is one of the programs that when Utah made the move to the Big 12, I do think this was a program that had the instant respect of Utah fans, given the battles that they had in the final days of the Mountain West Conference, back in the late 2000s. And understanding that TCU they've had their fair of success, in their move to the power level conference, and so I do think this is a matchup of two programs that have made that transition, that have proven themselves worthy of playing at this level, and I think this is one that a lot of Utah fans are looking forward to. Just in general, obviously there's context to take in with this season, for both teams, right? I don't think either team is, reaching preseason expectations to this point of the season, but both are coming into this one with looking at this game as probably an opportunity to turn things around. And so, this is going to be pretty competitive game. And this will certainly, get things going again for both fan bases, I think.
I think that's a great perspective. As it's a midway point of the season, TCU is coming off a bye. Not a team that was picked to be super competitive in the Big 12, but certainly not to fall on their faces the way that they have through the first 6 games, especially against Houston. Utah, on the other hand, big things were expected of the program, and for good reason. Kyle Whittingham is arguably the best coach in the Big 12 conference, even though he's kind of at the sundown or near the sundown of his career. You brought back a veteran quarterback who unfortunately has had the veteran injury issues that he's continued to have. I don't think there's a college football fan that doesn't feel bad on some level for Cam Rising and what he's been through the last several years. But this was a proven team, a team that had a lot of success in the Pac-12 and as such was picked to, be first or second in the conference this year by most media members. It's hard to say the season's disappointing when you factor in the injury issues and the different things that have gone on in Utah's program. But I'm sure from your perspective, from the fans' perspective, there is a level of disappointment. 1-2 in the Big 12, but still everything is ahead of this team when you look at who's remaining on the schedule and their chance to make it back into the Big 12 championship game picture. Where do you see Utah right now, and where do you think they can get, especially now knowing Cam Rising will not be the quarterback for the remainder of this year, it looks like?
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of disappointment, amongst the fan base and even amongst the team, given the consecutive losses now, first to Arizona a couple weeks ago and then on Friday night against Arizona State. And, with that loss to Arizona State, obviously is the loss of Cam Rising, and just understanding what that means for the ceiling of this team. Utah coming into the season, right? You have everything built around your star quarterback. He's been here with the program multiple years since 2019. He's gotten you to title games, won you 2 titles, and he's gotten you to the Rose Bowl game, which provided tremendous memories for a lot of Utah fans. And so you just know that there's coming into the season, there was a high expectation level for this team, and unfortunately, that was pushed into a set of water coolers, unfortunately, and those expectations fell with that. And it's just unfortunate for Rising himself that these are 2 freak injuries, and it's unfortunate in the sense that he won't be able to get Utah to their ceiling this year, and that's not to say that Isaac Wilson can't, but it just becomes that much more difficult for Utah to reach their ceiling. I don't think they have the same ceiling with an Isaac Wilson like they would with a Cam, and so there's just that reality sort of setting in right now. But at the same time, I think this is also an opportunity for the team and for the fan base to kind of just hit the reset button and to reset expectations, and to really not necessarily just enjoy the season, because there's going to be that lingering disappointment, but I do think it just allows kind of that the weight of those expectations are now gone, right? With 2 losses, with the loss of your quarterback, and so you're kind of playing a little bit with house money here, and so for Utah, this is a week. This is a pivotal week for them in their the rest of their season. They're looking at these next 6 games, as an opportunity to. They still feel like they're competitive, that they can get things going again and compete for the Big 12 title game. Kyle Whittingham has reiterated that fact multiple times, that he believes there's going to be, a team in that conference title game with a loss or with two losses. And so you got to stay competitive. And I think, for this team, with it coming off that loss, I think they've been able to genuinely hit the reset button and to just kind of reestablish their core values and fundamentals that have turned this program into the contender that it was, right? And I think that's going to be important. And this TCU team will be the first test, with that sort of refreshed mindset. And I think we'll learn a lot about Utah and how what's to expect the rest of the way, against TCU on Saturday night.
Kyle Whittingham and this Utah team has plenty of experience, unfortunately, with life without Cam Rising. Do you think that there's almost, relief isn't the word for it, but maybe a galvanization now knowing, hey, we've got to get behind Isaac Wilson. He's going to be the guy, and now we can game plan specifically for him, not just kind of hold the fort until maybe Cam Rising comes back?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a message shared with us this week by Mekhi Bernard, who is now the new team captain in place of Cam Rising, as well as Brent Keithy and offensive coordinator Andy Ludwig. It's they in dealing with this injury situation with Rising. Just given the fact that it was a finger on his throwing hand, it's such a volatile place on the body for a quarterback to be injured, right? If you throw it just the wrong way, you can potentially re-injure it or re-aggravate it. And so it's just that sort of thing where it was kind of touch and feel with the injury. And so that put this coaching staff in the difficult situation of trying to hope for the best with Cam Rising and trying to get him back and trying to get him, reps as he maybe needed them. They did give him rest during this period, which allowed them to focus on Isaac Wilson, but they still installed game plans centered around Rising and what he would be able to do. And so I think with the removal of that, it's unfortunate that obviously you can't replace Cam Rising. You're not going to be able to do that. But I think removing the two game plans and just being able to hone in on Isaac Wilson and what he does well, I think will be significant. It has the potential to be pretty significant for this offense, to not only just kind of settle in and but also to build chemistry with Isaac that they haven't necessarily been able to, given the fact that Rising status would go up to game day, and there was always that lingering question of will he or won't he play. And I think that is something that if given the truth serum throughout the program, that it probably had a bigger impact than we ever thought or acknowledged. And I think just having that opportunity now to focus in on Isaac Wilson, what he does well, and to build around him, I think again has the potential to really benefit this offense.
Let's talk about Isaac Wilson as a passer. He's gotten quite a bit of experience this year. He's done some things really, really well, and he struggled like you would expect a true freshman to do in others. He's completing 55% of his passes, I think 7 interceptions to 6 touchdowns. So it looks again like a true freshman getting his first starting experience. When you evaluate him, what do you think his strengths are at this point in his career, and where is there maybe an opportunity for the TCU defense to have some success against him?
Yeah, with Isaac, right, he is a true freshman. And with that, it's a totally new game at this level, right? Coming from a high-powered offense at Corner Canyon where you simply run an offense where you're kind of dictating the terms, to now you're at the college level, and not only is he learning, a new offensive playbook, but he's also having to learn entirely new defenses that he didn't see at the high school level. And so that's such a big adjustment for true freshman quarterbacks. Is not only do they need to learn how to execute their own plays, but they then need to figure out how to do it against certain defenses and certain looks. And that is the dynamic that I think Isaac is certainly has experienced so far this season. He had a great performance against Utah State where he showcased his arm talent and was able to make some really impressive throws. And given kind of the situation that he was in going into Oklahoma State, where that was a true, genuine game time decision for Cam, I think, you watch that game and you see some of the throws that he made, and they weren't necessarily super accurate. He made a couple of wild throws, but overall, I think that spoke to the lack of chemistry that he had with the receivers and with his targets. And then with Arizona getting into his third start, I think that was where you saw kind of just the grind of college level football, where he looked great to start the game, but as the game wore on, you just kind of saw the fatigue, I guess, of having to be good to make great decisions, on a consistent basis, right? And I think that is something that I think is certainly an area where coaches can help Isaac Wilson in providing him some, easier reads, easier opportunities, opportunities to get the ball out quickly. It's not that he's hanging on to the ball for a long time. He's still getting the ball out fairly quickly. I think he's averaging about 2.8 seconds to throw, which, is pretty good. But there's certainly quarterbacks in this league, specifically in this league, that are averaging much quicker times than that. And, that's good for two reasons, right? Is it allows you to, maintain efficiency with your passing game production, right? To just get the ball out quickly and to, keep gaining positive yardage. I think that's priority number one for Isaac and this offense, is improving the efficiency in gaining positive yardage. But then two, it minimizes the pressure that he's going to face. Getting the ball out quickly and minimizing opposing pass rushes is an important step for him in his progression. And so, if you're TCU, you're hoping that is not the case, that Utah is still, focused on, pushing the ball to the intermediate and deeper parts of the field with Isaac, and that can allow them to get pressure on him. He's, as any quarterback will, Isaac struggles against pressure, but he's struggled more than he struggled as you would expect a true freshman to struggle, right? And I think that is where, if you're TCU, that's where I would be focusing my game plan, is trying to get pressure on Isaac, because that can lead to hasty decisions, and hasty decisions can often be mistakes. So, that'll be kind of the key to this game is, who wins that battle, right? Is it TCU getting pressure on Isaac, or is it going to be Utah giving him options, giving him some easy buttons, and that sort of thing?
Well, the way that teams have been attacking TCU defensively is not passing the ball. It's simply running it down their throats, and with a lot of success. And so to me, the battle will be, is TCU able to limit turnovers themselves and put enough points on the board to where Utah feels like they have to pass the ball so that there's an opportunity to get pressure? That'll be the question. And you mentioned Utah's exceptional running back, and I fully expect him to get 75 carries on Saturday night. So tell us a little bit about Mekhi Bernard, what his strengths are, and why we can expect him to rush for 1,000 yards again's TCU's defense on Saturday evening.
Oh man, that would be great if he could, because man,
I would
he's
rather
earned
he
it.
not, but
Yeah.
we made UCF's backfield look like 100 All-Americans, and we've seen what's happened since then. TCU is coming off of a bye week. I do expect there to be some adjustments. Andy Avalos is a good defensive coach, and they're getting some guys back too. They're healthy, so they should put up more of a challenge. But I still think obviously there's opportunities for Utah. Had a lot of success on the ground game, and this is a very intelligent coaching staff with a great running back and a true freshman quarterback. I expect them to pound the rock. Where do you think Mekhi can be successful? And like, do you see him having a big game? Is he the type of guy that's going to take this on his shoulders and ball out for his team?
Yeah, I mean, that's what he's done so far this season. He has been the steady rock on the offense side of the ball as the guy that you can depend on to produce. In each and every game. That's what he's been this season, and now he's taking on the mantle of captain. I think that even it means a lot to him. He's been with this program for 5 years now. He's been with the program since 2019. He's been through a lot. He's been through the battles. He's been through the ups and downs, and he knows what it takes to get this team to compete at a good level. And so, for him, he's putting a lot on his shoulders to continue to carry his weight, but he knows that he can't do it by himself. And so, for him, he's proven that he can be pretty darn dynamic. I mean, you go back to that Oklahoma State game, he had one of the highlight reel plays of the season in the Big 12, in my opinion, when he broke off a 60-plus yard run, where he broke through multiple tackles, broke some ankles along the way. And that's been the big thing for him. He worked hard. He's always been kind of the third down scat back type where he's great in the passing game. You give him 8-10 carries a game, and that's good for him. But what he did this offseason is he worked hard to put on weight to gain the strength and mass that he needed to. He's still under 210 pounds. He's probably 205, but it's just the strength gains have really benefited him this season. And you've seen that this year when, talking about forced missed tackles, he's among the top running backs in the Big 12 in that regard. And so, he's close to 700 yards already. And I think with what he's shown, both not only in terms of the ground game, but he's an option in the passing game. And I think that is something that he does really well in adding production to the passing game. And so, I fully expect Mekhi Bernard to continue to be the focal point of the offense. Utah has been pretty consistent with their ground game in terms of, the offensive line being able to generate push. Spencer Fano, the right tackle, who was a freshman All-American last year, has really taken a big step forward in his game and is one of the top run blockers in college football this year. I think he's even the top graded.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think he's the top graded offensive tackle in all of college football. I would need to double check, but I know he was at least top 5 a couple weeks ago. And that grade has only gone up. So he's playing at a great level, and the offensive line in general, I don't know how much you subscribe to PFF, but I understand it and I get it. I get their methodology, and they've got all 5 offensive linemen among the top 10 in terms of the highest graded players on this Utah offense. Obviously, that speaks to the lack of passing game production, but even then, you still have Dorian Singer and Brant Keithy up there as well. So, it's all. But again, just Mekhi Bernard, he's going to be productive, and I think they're looking at this. They're probably looking at this as an opportunity for potentially a big game for him.
You laugh about your offensive linemen being your top 5 highest graded players on offense, but I can guarantee you there's a lot of TCU fans that would take that in a heartbeat at this moment in time, and not to be taken for granted whatsoever. I think that Utah's had some great offensive players through the years. Kyle Whittingham has produced some really great talent, but I think what they've always been known for is that defense. I mean, when you look back at some of the great battles between these two teams, they tended to be high scoring often, but it was the kind of the battle of these two defensive minded head coaches that were really willing to grind it out under the Gary Patterson era at TCU. Let's flip the ball over to the other side of the field now. Defensively, I don't know how much you've watched TCU, and I don't blame you if that answer is none. But, the turnovers that Josh Hoover has thrown and TCU's lack of ability to generate a consistent run offense have really been the stories of their lack of success this season. What does Utah do well on defense? Are they going to be able to hold true to a TCU team that I think has only rushed for over 100 yards one time or 2 times this season? One of them was LIU. Are they going to be able to take that away? And if so, will they put pressure on Josh Hoover and force him into some of those pressure turnovers that have kind of gotten this team in trouble down the stretch?
Yeah, I've watched a few games this season, a few TCU games. I watched the Stanford game to open the season. And
that was a fun game. That was a good game, especially in the second half.
That was a great game.
Oh, yeah, how I long for those days.
That final quarter, that was great.
Blast. Fourth quarter was a blast, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And then, I watched the game last week as well against Houston.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Melissa.
Okay, fair, Steve.
And so, it's interesting. I do think with this Utah defense, they understand that, hey, this is Sonny Dykes' offense. They've faced Sonny Dykes, throughout the years while he was at Cal. So they're very familiar with what this offense is capable of. And, with this Utah defense, it's interesting. If you read social media, you'd think that this defense is just playing it's garbage and it's not up to the level that it typically is, but they're still only allowing 17 points a game.
Jeez.
I think ESPN SP Plus still has them as the 14th most efficient defense or the 14th best defense in college football. It's just that, they play so well for the majority of the game, right? And I think what has happened is there's been one or two plays in the second half, in the fourth quarter specifically, that have just kind of broken the camel's back. And I think that's partly due to the defense just kind of wearing down and the offense not being able to put points on the board. And I think that's kind of contributed to the dialogue among Utah fans. But when you look at the numbers, this defense is still doing the things that you would expect a Utah defense to do. It is still performing at a very good level. It's just there are missed opportunities, right? Big plays that they've given up in the second half. You go back to the Arizona State game. Cam Scatterbu had two 50-yard runs essentially in that second half, breaking through tackles. Going back to the Arizona game, you had Noah Fafita making big throws and just back-breaking throws, on a third down for one and then a touchdown score for another. And those have really kind of contributed to the feeling that this isn't the same Utah defense. But I think Utah is looking at this as like, hey, we're playing really great defense for 90% of the game. We just need to close the gap on that last 10%. And a big key for them with that is, as silly as it sounds, is getting back to fundamentals and tackling. Missed tackles have been a big bugaboo for Utah in these past two games.
We know the feeling. We can empathize with you. It doesn't sound silly to me. It just reminds me of pain.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's certainly there. I could still, yeah. So that's been a point of emphasis for Utah the last 2 weeks, but particularly this week is getting back to the basics, back to the fundamentals, and I think that's been a good reset. So, obviously TCU with that offense, Josh Hoover, I'm impressed by him. He's able to make throws. He's able to make good decisions. And that passing game is certainly capable. It's one of the top passing games in the conference, right? So they know what this test is going to be. And for Utah, they know that they'll need to get that pass rush going as well to kind of offset that attack.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think that as you were talking about the defense, quote unquote, struggling, allowing 17 points a game, shut up. But it's a lot of it is when the offense puts the team in bad situations, and when you're starting a true freshman QB, or in TCU's case where you have some untimely turnovers, you're often putting the defense either getting back on the field too quickly, wearing them out, or just not putting them in advantageous situations, not allowing them to kind of pin their ears back and come after the quarterback. And so that's going to be the key is, can TCU be efficient on the offensive side of the ball? Can they move the ball on the ground? Can they sustain drives? And can they not turn it over and force Utah into some of those missed tackles or late, kind of backbreaking mistakes down the stretch? And that's going to require them to be in a close game in the fourth quarter, which is a lot to ask in a night game at Rice-Eccles Stadium. That's kind of one of the other things I want to talk to you about. For those of us that have never experienced this will be my first time. Obviously it's a little bit of a different feel. They're coming off of a couple of losses. They're starting to a freshman quarterback, but Utah fans are pretty diehard. What can we expect that environment to be like, and how much of an impact can that home field have on this game?
Yeah, the home field advantage at Rice-Eccles Stadium is pretty significant. And for whatever reason, it's amplified at night for whatever reason.
Well, and you can't really say because they've had all day to drink because it is Utah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We do tailgate at Utah,
yes,
and
it's not BYU.
There is a lot
We're
of
not
that.
Yeah. So
yeah. If you want to come tailgate and have a couple drinks, we've got plenty.
They might be like 3.2%, but still. A little low ABV,
it's watered
but we're
down.
strong.
Yeah, it's a little watered down. We're still, we're making progress in that regard. But no, it's so, at Rice-Eccles at night, it is, a pretty special environment. And I think one key for Utah in this game is actually getting off to a good start, because that's where things kind of they weren't able to get the crowd into the game against Arizona.
Mhm.
And that is, they didn't have that home field advantage like they typically do. It wasn't until an interception at the start of the fourth quarter by Teo Johnson against Arizona where you felt that typical Rice Eccles Stadium at night vibe. And, for Utah, getting off to a good start, getting into the end zone is going to be key to that. And if they're able to do that, then Rice Eccles Stadium fans will be engaged. They'll make their presence felt, and it's a fun environment. And for TCU fans who haven't been there, since 2010. They've added the south end zone, so now it's closed off, which is different than, for the fans that were there back then. It is different. And so it's added to kind of the sound, to the impact, to just that raucous feeling. And so, it's a great experience. And, at night with the lights and everything, it's just a great environment for college football.
I'm definitely excited as a photographer for the opportunities on the field. I'm a little disappointed because apparently this game is being well covered. That press box is going to be full, so I don't know where I'm going to get to defrost when it's 30-something degrees, but that's okay. Like, it's not about me. We'll be fine. But I think it is going to be fun. I won't make you do a score prediction because I know a lot of people don't like to do that, but I will ask, how do you see this game going? And if Utah is to win, to cover, whatever else, what has gone right for them? And if TCU were to somehow pull off an upset, what do you think has gone wrong for Utah or exceptionally correct for TCU?
Well, yeah, it goes back to the things that we've talked about, right? Is Utah going to be able to establish the ground game? Are they going to be able to protect Isaac Wilson and give him opportunities to be efficient in the passing game? Or is TCU, are they going to be able to get their passing game going and to get out to a lead and to force Utah into more of a pass-heavy offense? I do think that is kind of where this game is trending is, can Utah get the ground game going, or does TCU jump out to a fast start? And I think for Utah, regardless of that, you have to stay committed to the run game with Mekhi Bernard, because he's proven that he can create those explosive plays that can get that momentum, going and to get those quick scores. So, Utah, the key for them is their red zone offense. Above all else, that has to be something that they make market strides in, with how they've struggled this year. They were 1 of 4 against Arizona State in terms of getting into the end zone, in their red zone opportunities. They need to be much better in that regard. And if they are able to they've been pretty good about, moving the ball between the 20s, but then, they just need to punch it in. And if they're able to do that, that'll be a big thing for this entire team, because everybody knows these red zone struggles have been the big bugaboo for Utah. So if they start punching it into the end zone, that's going to be a big, just kind of a big motivator for the team, and to get that defense even more engaged. So yeah, it'll be, I anticipate this being a pretty competitive game. I think TCU has proven that they can, again, with that passing game, they can get going in a hurry. And obviously their struggles, and Utah's had struggles as well. So, this will be kind of I anticipate a competitive game. I think there will be parts where it's kind of a grind. And then, we'll see some quick scores, I think. So, we'll get a little bit of everything. And with TCU coming off the bye, I'm really interested to see how refreshed and rejuvenated they look coming into this matchup.
You and me both, Steve. You and me both. This is obviously not just a huge moment for TCU and for Utah, but Sonny Dykes as well. He's got, he doesn't have a lot of leash to right the ship, I don't think, and he's got something to prove. So it'll be interesting to see how the team kind of galvanizes and rallies around him with arguably their toughest road game of the season out in Salt Lake City Saturday night. It's so late too. Like, I have a bedtime. Yeah. Do the schedulers not understand that? But I got up at 1 a.m. in a foreign country to watch that Houston game. So I'm obviously a glutton for punishment and to hate myself. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us and filling us in on the Utah side of things. Where can people find your work and get more insight into this Utah football team?
Yeah, so Steve Bartle, you can find me Bartle KSL Sports on Twitter, and you can find me at kslsports.com.
Awesome. Again, really appreciate your time, and I will say looking forward to Saturday night, but with not bated breath, but more just fear and shame. Appreciate your time, Steve. And thank you, as always, to the Flying T Club for sponsoring our podcast, and, of course, our friends at Dave Campbell's Texas Football.
Very thankful for Steve to take the time out of a busy week to hop on the show and talk with Melissa, preview the game. I think it's going to be a great one. Like I said before we got into that interview, I just have a weird feeling that this one's going to stay close for a little while. Whether TCU ends up winning it or not, I'm not sure. But I just got a feeling, one of those gut things. But one of the things that has given me pause is something that I wrote about earlier today. Let's get the preview off of here. Let's stop sharing and let's go to my face, because that's what everybody wants, right? And let's talk about something that came up at Sonny Dykes' press conference in the midweek this week. So Sonny Dykes was asked, I believe it was by Estridge, about Kyle Whittingham, Utah's coach, and just what he thought of him, because Whittingham's been the coach. I believe this is his 21st year at the University of Utah. He's been an incredible head coach there. He's gotten them. He is, for all intents and purposes, Utah's Gary Patterson, right? He won 2 Pac-12 championships. He won the Mountain West a couple times. He's taken them to the BCS. He's gotten them in to New Year's Six Bowls, right? Like, he's done all of the same kinds of things at Utah that Gary did at TCU. And Sonny, had a couple comments about him today. Said he's a Hall of Fame football coach. Said that he's a great football coach. That I believe the exact quote is, "I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. Just his consistency. His teams are always well coached. They have an identity. They play hard." And when you look at Utah football, it's really easy to see what that identity is. They want to run the football well. They want to play tough defense. But above all, the kind of overarching theme of Utah football over the last 20 years has been physical. They are a physical football team. They get after your ass. They want to push you around. They are disciplined. They are tough. They come out with energy. And oftentimes, that's why they were successful in the Mountain West. That's why they were successful in the Pac-12. It's because they came out with more energy, they played with discipline, and they beat you up. It's a very good football program up there in Salt Lake City. And that got me thinking, though, as Sonny was talking about Utah's identity, what is TCU's identity right now? Because we used to know. We used to know what it was. It was the same kind of identity that Utah has. They wanted to run the football effectively. They were going to air it out at times, though, depending on who the offensive coordinator was. And you knew they were going to play tough defense. They were going to hit you hard, and they were going to bend your will. They were going to try and break you. And that is a mentality and an identity that carried TCU through 20 years of success under Gary Patterson. Did it fade near the end from 2018 to 2021? Absolutely it did, because sometimes situations change and things just kind of go off the rails. But for a long time, TCU football was known in a similar way to what Utah is known as now. And so I asked Sonny, as a follow-up question to his comments about Utah's identity, I asked him, what would you say TCU's identity is right now? And he gave a pretty brief answer. But he did say, well, I would say right now we're a team that's been inconsistent. I think that's our identity right now. And it was an intriguing answer to me for 2 reasons. One, I think he's being honest. And if you listen to my interview with Sam Kahn from The Athletic last week, you know that authenticity and honesty have never been issues with Sonny. And I think he's being honest now. And I think that's a fair assessment to an extent. And you look at what TCU has done defensively since 2023 and parts of 2022. If you look at the turnovers that we've seen from the offense over the last 2 years, yeah, inconsistency has been a big problem for this team. But I think there's another kind of underlying foundational identity crisis that TCU is going through right now. And it goes back to that physicality that we were just talking about with Utah, that challenge that TCU seems to have of establishing physical dominance over another team. And that starts in the trenches. It starts with the offensive line. It starts with the defensive line. And we've seen a significant decline in the physicality of the offensive line and defensive line over the 2.5 years that Sonny Dykes has been here. In 2022, in the year that TCU made the college football playoff, beat Michigan, and went to the national championship game, they had the number 27 run blocking offensive line in the country and the number 40 pass blocking offensive line in the country. Top 40 in both is really good. It's not like elite level Michigan levels of good or those old Wisconsin offensive line levels of good, but it's really damn good. I mean, you're talking about top 40 in both. Normally you'll see one be high and one will be a little lower, but they were really good in both. Well, here's where they are this year. Currently through 6 games in 2024, TCU is 78th in run blocking and 102nd in pass blocking, according to Pro Football Focus. That's a significant drop. It's over 50 spots in both areas. And you look at what TCU's had to do along the offensive line over the last 2 years. They had to replace 4 starters on the line from 22 to 23. They had to replace another 4 from 23 to 24. I've talked about this on the podcast before. But the consistency of those offensive lines has been their inability to be physical and to be physically dominant. And that's why we've seen, even though the offense is putting up really good numbers, we've seen an inefficient at times offense over the last year and a half. Defensively, on the other side of things, TCU right now is 101st in the country in pass rush, and they're 84th against the run. And you're thinking, well, they're worse against the run than the pass. Yes, but more opportunity, more volume means that success is going to impact your numbers a little differently. So if you're not facing the passing game a lot and you give up some big chunk yardage and some big touchdowns like TCU has against UCF and SMU and Houston even, those negative plays are going to impact you a little bit more than when you're just consistently mediocre at best against the run, which TCU has been consistently below average against the run, which is why you see them at 84th. They've been hit and miss and against the pass, and the misses are catching up essentially at this point. They had a really great coverage night against Stanford, and from there we've seen kind of a steady decline in the pass coverage. So the question becomes, why? Is it talent related? Is it execution? Is it coaching? And the debate has raged on over the last few weeks about which one of those things it is. Is it scheme? You know, what is the origin point for these inconsistencies and for this lackluster gameplay that we're seeing on Saturdays? But I think it all comes back to this concept of physicality, this concept of just being tougher and being ready to play. Because when you're tough and when you're ready to play, you're going to get after people. You're going to execute better. You're going to be where you're supposed to be. And frankly, when you're tougher, you maybe turn the ball over less. Maybe you tackle on the first try instead of the third, right? So some of these issues that we're seeing, I think, lead back to this inconsistent physicality that TCU has had for the last couple of years. This is not something that has gone unnoticed, by the way. Sonny Dykes has talked about it pretty consistently, and he talked about it again in his midweek presser this week. He said, the more physical you can be, the better you're going to be. Obviously, Utah, that's what they're known for. That's what they hang their hat on, is their physical nature. So we've had to prepare for that. But at the same time, we want to be known for that as well. That's our hope, is to be known as a fast, physical football team. Typically, if you can do those things well, then you're going to have a lot of success. And he's right. And I think this is a really nice improvement from what we heard from him after the Houston game, where he seemed like he didn't have an answer. Over the bye week, it appears that he's really honed in on a fixable issue for his football team, and that is physicality and intent. When you step onto that football field on Saturdays, are you going to be the more physical person? Are you going to be the more physical unit? Are you going to be the more physical team? In theory, it's one thing. In practice, it's another. And this game against Utah is going to really challenge TCU to show that they're taking a step in the right direction from a physicality standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see. The other side of that, though, is something that Bud Clark talked about in his media availability this week. He was asked about what the disconnect is between these excellent weeks that we're hearing about them having as far as practice is concerned, and then what we're seeing on the field on game days. And he said it was all about energy. He says if you look across the country, he said he watched a lot of football over the bye week. If you look across the country, typically the team that had more energy ended up winning the football game. He mentioned Oregon over Oregon State, over Ohio State. He mentioned LSU over Ole Miss, a couple other games as well, where he said those teams had more energy when it mattered, and they're the ones that ended up winning the football game. And it was nice to hear him say that. Again, it's a step in the right direction as far as identifying what the problem is, calling the problem out. Now it's about being solution-oriented, fixing the problem, and having that fix show up on Saturday. It's a hard opponent to try and fix physicality and energy when you're talking about a Utah team who's had that embedded in their identity for 2 decades. TCU used to as well, and this Saturday would be as good a time as any, frankly, for that identity to show back up on their sideline as well. That's going to do it for this episode of Frogs Insider. Again, big thanks to Steve Bartle from KSL Sports for hopping on the show and talking to Melissa. Go over to flyingtclub.com, check out Flying T Club, see how you can get involved, and a big thanks to Dave Campbell's Texas Football as well. Last but not least, go subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the like button on this video, share it with a friend, get the word out. We're getting closer to 1,000. We want to get there before Halloween because all the fun stuff I talked about at the top of the show. But for now, if you're going to Utah, I'll see you there because I'm going to be there, and we'll talk to you again on Monday morning next week. Go Frogs.